And about 20 minutes later, it's taken a dark turn.
Subscribe to the podcast, KFC Radio on YouTube.
Bang.
How you doing?
What's going on, my man?
Chris
Good to see you.
Hansen.
How's everything?
Good.
Nice to meet you too. Nice to see you.
Chris, why don't you have a seat over
Yeah. Exactly.
How we doing?
I'm great, man.
Yeah?
Great. That's a strong word. Great.
Great's a strong word, yeah.
You're looking sharp.
Yeah, you look fantastic.
Feel good, man.
Look like you're about to ski in the Swiss
Yeah.
Alps.
No, you look like you just got off the mountain, a little après ski.
A little opera.
Yeah, a little après
Nothing
in
wrong with that.
Aspen.
I gotta get some skiing going.
You want some whiskey in your coffee there?
I'm good. Thank you. It all looks delicious. Whistle Pig, that's top-notch stuff.
That's
Oh yeah.
right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We just got our own bottle.
Oh wow.
We did our
we did
our own barrel with them.
our
Have you
own
done
single
the?
barrel.
Oh, that's awesome. Have you done the whiskey tour?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. a couple
Oh, you been to
times
the
now.
farm?
I have not. But,
We'll get you in. We'll get you in.
Some
Yeah, we
pals
know
of mine were just down there. Yeah.
Were they?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really.
Did you ever
really
read
nice.
Pappyland?
No.
Great book about Pappyland whiskey.
Oh,
It's
okay.
it's a phenomenal story.
Chris, I love that you just asked us if we've read before.
You don't know
Do we
what
look
you're
like two
walking
guys who
into.
do a lot of reading? We just offered you whiskey at 1
Yeah.
p.m. You think we read a lot?
You can't scare me.
I was gonna say you've probably seen it all, brother. haven't you?
I've seen a lot, that's for sure.
You've seen. I mean, you've. I guess good for career, but I don't know about the mental side of things. You've seen like the worst of the worst,
Well, yeah, but when you go into crime reporting, and sometimes you have an interest in something, and the rest of it happens around you, and you hit upon a franchise like the Predator franchise, and it just becomes what it's become, and you learn because it happens transitionally. It's not like all at once.
Right.
When I graduated from college and went to do the Predator franchise or any of the other big crime stories we've done over the years, but so you ease into it, and so you sort of figure out a balance in life, and how do you put it in perspective, and I've always been very fortunate to really not let it ever get me.
Kinda keep
I've
it
seen
separated.
I've seen stuff. I mean, we've been undercover in Cambodia, where Americans and Western Europeans were going to brothels and abusing 4, 5, and 6-year-old children.
Oh,
I mean, that stuff sticks with you.
Yeah, that's exactly what
But
I'm talking
when
about.
when you do it and you win an Emmy for it, and you realize that the attention it gets not only funds NGOs to do that work
Sure.
again, but it also helps law enforcement solve other cases. So these things, one story goes out in 100 different directions, and so
Right.
people become aware of a situation.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no doubt
You
that
know?
you made a difference. I mean, it shined a light on something that I think a lot of people, especially at the time when it came. When did that start?
Well, that was a different franchise. We did that in 04 and 08.
Yeah,
over in
that's a
Cambodia.
time where I don't know if everybody was quite aware
I don't
of the
think so.
internet.
I mean,
and how
I
dark it
wasn't.
could get.
Yeah,
and,
how dark.
and how what's really going on. And then a show like that is like, oh wow,
Yeah.
this
I mean, we've
is-
always done crime stuff, whether it's been, back when the Unabomber was active, or, all kinds of other breaking news. But, the Predator franchise was a great example of getting inside, and watching the commission of a felony.
right.
And then this collision of justice
Yeah.
and this awakening of the human being who's going to be accused of this crime, who's trying to commit a crime against a child. It just one big, you
Yeah.
know, collision of events that really became compelling.
Is there any? I remember when I was watching The Jinx on HBO about
Right.
Robert Durst. They had their piece of evidence, like kind of like
Right.
the smoking gun. But before they could do anything, they needed to talk to law enforcement and
Sure.
kind of make sure. I would imagine, like it would seem to me, like what you were doing might impede on an investigation, or could it potentially blow it for law enforcement? Like, did you work with them to be like, we have him, dead to rights, don't fuck this up, sort of thing?
In
or
the very first investigation, we just had Perverted Justice, the online watchdog group, operate as decoys online, posing as kids. And we got a rental house, and we put hidden cameras and microphones in it, and I had security. A fellow who was former NYPD who did my security and Saturday Night Live and a lot of other stuff.
and you just do this on your own. You like
the
set out
first
to-
time we did.
Yeah,
The first
yeah.
time we did.
Just set out on
because
your
we
own,
didn't
yeah.
know what we're going to find.
Right.
And honestly, I was driving out. We did this in Long Island, Bethpage, Long Island. And as I was driving over there, I got caught in traffic on the Throgs Neck Bridge. and I started to daydream. I thought, God, what if nobody shows up? What if I've just, blown tens of thousands of dollars of the network's money? And with that, my producer called and said, where the hell are you? We've got 2 guys scheduled to show up in 45 minutes. Yeah. So over the next 2.5 days, we had 17 guys surface in that investigation, including a New York City firefighter. So we did it, and it went on air, and the firefighter was prosecuted federally, but the other guys were in the wind. Right. We did it again outside Washington, D.C., again without collaborating with law enforcement. And law enforcement did, to its credit, come in and make these prosecutions later. This is where we had the first naked guy and the rabbi and the soldier and all these other people show up. And it became very apparent after that second investigation. Now, remember, this wasn't pitched by me as a long-term project.
Right.
This was a one-off for Dateline. This was just another crime story segment.
Yep.
And now 18 years later, it's spun off into all these different franchises. So in the third investigation in California, in Riverside, we collaborated with Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and 51 guys showed up, and 51 guys were arrested and prosecuted.
So you would like, they would come into the house, you would do the whole thing, and then they would just leave?
In the beginning, yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. Imagine that. So not only did it become socially irresponsible to not involve law enforcement, it was unfulfilling
for
the viewer.
Caught him, but it's
as
like,
a producer of television, it's like, okay, this guy, walking down the street after committing a heinous crime.
Wow, that's crazy.
That is
now, all these years later, the episodes we're doing for True Blue are a little different with law enforcement because different law enforcement agencies with which we work have different sort of protocols. So generally speaking, the guy walks in, I get a chance to confront them. If they stay and talk, which normally they do, that conversation continues. If they get jakey or leave, then they're arrested.
Sure.
And
so the cops are kind of like, we'll let you do your thing.
Yeah,
and then
for the most part. Sometimes the cops make the arrest, and then I get a chance to really get in this guy's head, which also is an interesting way to look at it. The purists, the followers of this franchise, want to see it the same way every time. And it's pretty close to the way it's been, but you can't – you see these vigilante groups out there, and there's a definite place for citizen journalists, don't get me wrong. And there are a lot of them doing a lot of great work on podcasts and YouTube shows and whatnot. But in this area – almost universally, law enforcement discourages vigilantes from going out and trying to lure a predator. Now, some high-level guys have been caught, right?
Yeah.
And face justice, but they're hard cases to prosecute.
Right.
So I've got to balance what is socially responsible with what is, good television and compelling material that creates awareness and a dialogue that is very important. I mean, you think about this for a minute. I had no idea when we started that we'd still be doing this particular franchise.
Right.
And, obviously, I'm going to do all kinds of crime-related investigative enterprise stories. But during the pandemic, at the peak of the pandemic, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which is tasked with keeping this information, and the social media platforms have to report, it's federally mandated, the number of inappropriate contacts between adults and children online soared like 900%.
Sure, skyrocket.
And when we started this, we merely had decoys in chat rooms on AOL and Yahoo. And now, I mean, the number of social media platforms has exploded. I can't even keep up with them.
And you can have multiple accounts and burners. I mean, there's, one guy could have 10 different things.
And then it goes from the social media platform where they meet to the cell phone to the, to the DMs and the chats, and it's harder to track. In the beginning, they were all in 2 or 3 different areas.
Right.
You could use Grindr, you could use Tinder, you could use some other stuff, but generally speaking, these AOL and Yahoo chat rooms.
I mean, that really is
where it was all
kind of the dark side of technology.
I was pretending to be someone else in those as well. I was pretending to be
we always joke about it. Yeah, we like my generation of kids. I was born
a
in
child
85.
at the time, so I'm good.
If you were like an 80s kid, when AOL first started, we all loved the chat rooms.
Oh yeah.
And for some reason, without even talking, without even having the true internet to connect, every young boy, adolescent boy, went into a chat room and pretended to be a lesbian girl.
And we all did it.
And we realized we were probably talking
What's
to each
that
other.
look all about? What the hell was that?
You didn't do it?
Oh, you did it. All right.
To my generation, it was sneaking into Bobby West's dad's garage box and getting the Playboy magazine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all we had.
But
in
that's
those
a little
days,
more like, that's just like
purely
boys
an
want to
interest, but
see,
it's the same.
naked
Yeah.
people. For us to be like, I'm going to pretend to have sex, but I'm going to be a
I'm a
lesbian.
24-year-old lesbian girl
There
from
was
Los
some
Angeles.
weird shit that went on, and we kind of laugh about it. But then there's the people who, I'm sure they took it 2, 3, and 10,000 steps further, and it's like, I mean, the internet can be a horrible, horrible thing.
yeah.
But I guess as many opportunities as it gives these sick people, it also is probably that helpful to catch them. Right?
But it requires vigilance, and I think for a long time and still today, people think their kids are safe on the mainstream social media platforms. So we had a case, and we're going to roll it out on True Blue very soon, the new crime streaming network, that a 12-year-old girl was on Instagram, and a guy hit on her, and they went into the DMs, and next thing you know, she's sneaking out of her bedroom. He's flying up from Florida. They're meeting in a church parking lot. It ends up in a hotel. There's a sexual assault. She goes to the emergency room the next day, and the sheriff's department in Genesee County, Michigan, actually traces this back, gets surveillance video at the hotel, rental car records, the whole thing, identifies the guy, arrests him, they brace him, and he cops out to like 2 or 3 other similar crimes.
No way.
This is Instagram.
Yeah, right. It's not. It's
where
not
you think,
some creepy, yeah. I mean, everything can be used.
Yeah, exactly.
How
Any
dark you wanna
communication
make it.
device.
Yeah.
And these guys, we do the podcast, the Predators I've Caught podcast, where I go back over these previous cases. And as you can imagine, on some of these things, I'm doing this on the fly. I get the transcripts last minute. I sort of go through it, and I figure my way out of this situation, or get as much out of the guy as I possibly can. But when we go back and do the podcast, I have all that. I immerse myself in it, and what you see is this pattern of grooming that is routinely used. And I don't know whether there's a place on the web where guys go to learn this, or whether it's just the same grooming that goes on in person-to-person interactions. But
You mean
it's
almost
frightening.
like a script? You mean like they all
Almost
say the
like a
same thing?
script. Like
Yeah.
if a guy's trying to go after a boy. Oh, are you gay? What have you done? It's hard to come out. It's hard. I can help you, or I can teach you, and all that sort of. If it's a girl, yeah, you seem really mature for your age, and boy, you're really pretty. Are you sure you're only 12 or 13? And it just. You can see them using their adult mind to bend the mind of a child.
Shit, yeah, I'm a child. Ugh.
What level of credit do you give yourself for making this like a mainstream known? Because I know the reason I asked that is I was just watching A Friend of the Family, which is a show on Peacock about Bob. God, I forget. Abducted in Plain Sight is the documentary on Netflix.
Right.
And this is the Peacock show about it. And I was talking to my parents because it happened in '76, I think.
Right.
And I was like, did you even know back then? Like, did you use the word pedophile? And they were like, no, we did not.
No.
Like, people were weird, or that guy, you don't hang around that guy, but like, no one was like, these are pedophiles.
I mean, I can remember the first time it ever came on my radar. I was caddying. I grew up in suburban Detroit at Forest Lake Country Club, and Big Joe, the caddy master, got all the caddies together. And I was 13 at the time. He said, "Now, I know some of you guys hitchhike to work. I mean, people hitchhike routinely back in the day. And if a guy picks you up and never puts his hand on your lap or anything like that, and just get out of the car and go away." And I was thinking to myself, who would do that and why? I mean, it just didn't register with me that was a thing.
Yeah,
people do.
right.
And then you file it away, and then all of a sudden, years later, you're doing stories.
Well, that's
on this type of
you
activity.
also wonder. Again, the internet enables so much of it,
Right.
but it also is you can get caught. And so
Yeah.
you think back
Well,
then,
there's
there more like it's probably less of it happening just because they don't have access to them.
Right.
But the ability to get away with it, is
It was
like
the Oakland County child killer, which was a notorious case in the area where I grew up when I was in high school. And it was a guy or 2 guys who were kidnapping boys and girls, sexually assaulting them, killing them, and leaving their bodies scrubbed to be found by authorities. And it was a vexing case, and it shattered the confidence and calm of the community. Sure. And later, met some of the people whose kids were victimized in this, and did some stories on it as a local reporter in Detroit, and later at the network. And thinking back at the time, it really didn't register that, again, anybody would take part in this. There was crime, obviously, but crime was motivated by money or rage or jealousy or drugs or whatever it was. But this targeting children, God, it's just horrible.
Do you you kind of treat them with a level of, I don't want to say respect, but
Right.
like you let them talk and you have a discussion, and I mean I don't know if I would even have the couth or the tact to not just be like, you sick motherfucker.
Well, and I've done that too,
Yeah.
but the way I look at it is this. I mean, anybody can jump out of the bushes and create 10 seconds of dramatic television.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
My job is to get in there and get inside this guy's mind. And so if I'm patient or I'm toying with him
Do
a
you
little
like
bit.
sympathize with them ever to do that?
I
though?
think
Is there
I've
level
seen a
of,
couple
like,
of things that made me sad. We had a guy who was 19 or 20 who went on about being overweight and this and that, and he just suffered from depression, and he's just trying to meet a girl, and for a minute you can feel sad,
There
but the
are
reality
times
is,
I've
but
felt
what
that
happens?
watching it, and I get mad at myself. I'm
Yeah,
like,
but
why are you
what
feeling
happens
bad?
if this guy does, assault a child?
Yeah.
And what's the difference, by the way, between a 19-year-old doing this and a 39-year-old?
Right.
This isn't a high school Romeo-Juliet situation. This isn't nailing a 17-year-old for trying to get with a 15-year-old
Right.
who are both in high school.
Right.
Right.
These are cases where it's clearly an adult preying upon a child. And there's, to me, there's no gray area there.
What about those other situations though? I feel like you see that every now and then where I do
do?
kind of go like, well,
I think
I was kind of in that,
Yeah,
or like
I
I,
mean-
see those things, and I don't think that.
As a freshman, I lost my girlfriend to a senior. I get it. They should all be prosecuted.
At least that guy.
Put him on the list.
That one.
Well, I think what happened was, like so many things in the criminal justice system, occasionally you go so far forward to, combat crime, which is, we can all agree, an important thing. But it's like, the over 650 grams of cocaine or heroin. Should that person go away for life if they're 17 or 18 years old when they get popped with the heroin? Probably that's unnecessary. If you got somebody who's 17 dating a 15-year-old and they're sexually active, they get caught, should that 17-year-old who's a senior have to be on the sex registry
Right,
for the rest
right.
of his life
Seems
because he
rather
had
harsh.
an intimate relationship with his girlfriend who was a sophomore?
Right.
I think that's a Romeo and Juliet situation, and that's wrong. The kid should not pay the price. That's almost a parental issue at that point.
Yeah.
And those laws vary from state to state. But when we talk about a 13, 14, 12, 13, 14, or 15-year-old boy or girl getting hit upon by an adult, to me, there's no gray area.
Right. No,
That's a crime.
that's cut and
Yeah,
dry.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
mean, we wouldn't, if we saw somebody approach a 15-year-old and we confirmed they were 17, we wouldn't do it. I mean, 19, 20 is even.
Are there ones that
I don't remember seeing
Have you ever
that.
like cut a, or like have you ever been wrong and been
No.
like, oh,
We've never
it's-
cut-
it's
I mean-
usually by that point there's like a million examples of evidence, right?
There have been cases that initially did not get, full treatment in the piece. We had a guy come in Riverside who obviously had a scar on his head and he was slow. And so he was shown as a guy who came in to meet a child, but we didn't get into the whole thing. He wasn't that articulate. But some weeks later, the same guy shows up in Long Beach, California, in a separate investigation, and we learn he did a year in jail for a violent assault. Well, this guy's making the movie
Right,
at this
right,
point.
right.
You're going to be in the show.
Do you ever have someone come in where you're like, oof, that guy is big. I wish he was smaller.
Yeah,
you get
I mean,
nervous?
it's happened. I mean, I was in Petaluma once, and a guy walked in, and this guy was in the Navy, and he had taken his shirt off because his
Jesus.
thought was he was going to get in the hot tub with a girl.
Yeah.
And he comes around the corner. He got past the barrier, which happens sometimes, and I think he saw the sound guy first with the boom, and then he saw me, and I came out, and we came face to face, and he tensed up. And he's way, I'm a fairly fit guy, but this guy was really built. And it went like that. And I said, you don't want to do that. And he
make
I
things
just
worse.
saw
You
all
calm
his
down.
muscles.
You're like, I wish you were a fat,
I
depressed
mean, I would have danced.
19-year-old.
I had Ronnie Knight, my security guy, right there. The police are all around. So, the reality is, sure, it's edgy. And could something happen? Yes, that's the nature of the beast when you're doing these kinds of stories. But it's about as safe as you can possibly make it. I mean, a lot goes into it with barriers and barricades and just sort of being aware of what can happen. And if somebody in the chat is saying, I never go anywhere without a gun, I hope you don't mind, I'm bringing a gun with me, or any talk like that, or we find out that there's a violent background, the police are going to arrest him before he comes in. We're just not going to,
That is not my kind of game, by the way.
Yeah.
No.
Just I'm gonna bring a gun.
Yeah, well, we've had it happen. We've had guys, a guy who, for instance, was a Marine sniper said, "I never go anywhere without my gun." Well,
Well, the police handle that one.
get you to the driveway, and it's the team's responsibility at that point.
Yeesh. What do you? I mean, I think in recent years, true crime has become, like, just even the phrase "true crime" I feel like has become a thing. But I mean, you guys were on that wave way earlier. Yours was more like current and unfolding as well, more than cold cases and whatnot. But
we infiltrated the commission of a crime, so
Right,
people
yeah.
could see it as it happens. Now, obviously, we can get video of things after the fact, and police video and body cam and all things like that. But very rarely did you ever see somebody in my business who was there as this was going down
Right.
and took part in the questioning of the person.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, what made it so compelling, especially.
Right. I mean, it
people
probably
expect
is
it now, but
Do you get a little
think,
jealous? We're like, I've been on this.
Yeah, like
No, I think
do you
it's-
think you were the first? I feel like you were the first.
I don't know if I was the first. I mean, people are doing a lot of good crime reporting for years, and doing investigative reporting and hidden camera reporting. And
But as far as that, like, kind of viral or like popularity wave of like everybody talking
we
about
hit this and continue to do it in an environment where things become viral very quickly.
it. Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate in my career to establish a brand. And so when I do something on Tracy Hoodsona, the con woman who bilked Jumana Kid out of $3 million and opened up some restaurants, and the chase and all the bad stuff she did, and it becomes a part of a Chris Hansen franchise to go after these people and hold them accountable. It's not just the predators, it's all these other crime documenters are doing. And so it allows us to have True Blue as a streaming crime network, and within that, True Crime Nation, which is our new news magazine. And because I've been doing it for 40 years, I can go to most law enforcement agencies and say, hey, look, I'd like to do this. Will you guys help us out? And generally speaking, they do. Whether it's a predator case or the case of this poor woman from Charlotte who's, found dead down at Cabo, and all these other cases, the case in Idaho of the kids that were slaughtered by whomever. I mean, all those cases, when I walk into a police department, typically they're going to give me as much as, if not more, than anyone else, because there's this trust there. There's this, feeling of, well, he knows what we do. He's not going to screw us over. I don't have any bad blood with law enforcement. I mean, if somebody does something, as in Minnesota, where they kill somebody, that cop is going to be held responsible. But that would be the same for most responsible law enforcement people around the country anyway.
Right.
Is there ever a moment where you're like conflicted about, I'm sure you've done well and it's a franchise and a brand and then money and success, but it's obviously the worst thing in the world,
Yeah.
So when you hear of a new case or particularly, there was the guy who had like the condoms or the naked guy or the ones that jump out where it's compelling TV.
Sure.
And so part of you might be like, well, that's going to be good, but also you're like, oh,
Well, I'm
hate
a
that this is
realist,
happening.
and so I know what makes for compelling television. And I also know that by putting it on television or streaming it, that it creates awareness and a dialogue that's very important. And if you can get inside that guy's mind, right, and understand the mind of a predator, financial, sexual, whatever, and then hear the voice of a victim, you can better prevent other people from becoming victims. And I'm fortunate because I have the ability to take people into places where they get to see things they wouldn't normally see or hear things they wouldn't normally hear, and that's a gift. It's something I've worked very hard for, but it's a gift. And so it creates compelling television. And in terms of crime, these stories are as old as the Bible. It's good versus evil, and it always is interesting to people to do. It's fascinating. It continues to be fascinating to me.
It is interesting that you say that, like getting into their mind, because I think of the Netflix show Mindhunter, where in the beginning they're like, "What are you, a pervert? Like, why, like, just lock them away, lock them up, throw away the key. Don't get in their mind. Like, no, this will be helpful in awareness and prevention and all that kind of stuff.
Well,
where it does make a lot of sense.
Does it? Has there been a drop, or because I think this is something that's so primal and like so fucked up that even when this show comes out and people are getting caught, and I think it wouldn't stop anybody from their urges.
We now have people say in the chats, and we've got literally 20 new episodes ready to roll out on True Blue, we were down in Polk County, Florida, and we had people in the chat say, "Is this a Chris Hansen deal?"
Yeah.
Like, you have to tell me.
And the
If
decoy-
you're a cop,
well,
you have to tell
that-
me.
Yeah, that's first of all, that's a fallacy. You know, I don't know. I don't know who thunked that up. But, you know, that's just not true. You know, I've got dope, but you're a cop. So these guys would say that, and the decoy would say, you know, who's that? And so, oh, he's this guy who's on television, and he works with the police, and they grab people like me or whatever. And no, and they show up.
Like, what?
We had a
Double
guy.
jeopardy. You know.
We had a guy, and I just screened this piece before I left my office to come over here to chat with you guys. This guy's Matthew Bonjean, right? He's a 40-something-year-old who's in a chat room, and he thinks he's in a scenario where he can have sex with a 12-year-old girl with the permission of the mother. This is in Polk County, Florida. He's in Florida on a training seminar for his company. He's in from Hemet, California. And they pop him. I get a chance to interview him, and I go deep with this guy for 30, 40 minutes.
Jesus.
Really?
And it's like a Silence of the Lambs moment. He's like, I said, do you think this is funny? No, but I'm just nervous, and you know, I've seen your shows before. I never thought I'd end up on one. I said, well, what did you think was going to happen here? He walks into his bathing suit, wants to go for a swim with this girl at a hotel pool. And the Sheriff's Department in Polk County, led by Grady Judd, pops them. They're very active in this world. And my mind is spinning because obviously this guy's going to tell me everything. Where do I go next to, you know, keep it on track?
Yeah.
You know, and you don't want to jump down his throat necessarily because you do want him to keep talking. But you want to hold him accountable, so you walk this fine line in these interviews sometimes to, you know, try to get everything you want and keep it on track.
God.
That's I have a buddy who's a lawyer, and he worked child predator cases for a while, and he had to stop. He couldn't do it anymore.
Well, it is,
like,
and I get to step away from it. I
Right.
mean, in the criminal justice system, and I don't mean to sound like the announcer on Law and Order, but you know, these people have to live it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have to view the images of child pornography.
Right,
I mean,
right,
I
right.
thankfully have never really seen much of it, and because it takes its toll. The
Yeah.
FBI agents, and I've known a lot of agents and local law enforcement who have to look at this because somebody's going to testify and say that it is in fact child porn.
his thing too was he had a lot of regrets in quitting.
Yeah.
Because he was like, someone's got to do it.
Right,
And he felt like, he's like, I do it. Like, you know, what you're doing is in every sense of the word heroic, but it has to.
Well,
it has to
it's
weigh.
you know, I've been able to keep it in perspective. I think for the most part, but you know, the other area of this that's important is that, you know, this isn't a glamorous part of medicine, treating these guys, right?
Yeah.
So if you spend $200,000 on a medical degree, do you want to be a, you know, plastic surgeon over on Park Avenue,
Sure.
Right.
or do you
Or
want to
you
go
wanna
into federal prisons and spend your day with sex offenders and
Right.
talk about what makes you tick and how many times have you viewed child pornography before you offended and you got caught for this one crime, but how many others did you do? I mean, it's not a glamorous part of medicine.
no,
Thank
not at
God there are
Some
people who
will
do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we have some insight into who needs to be locked up forever, who can be treated and monitored, and who can be, you know, wrapped on the knuckles and say, don't do this again.
Do you sympathize in that regard? Like, I know there are people who believe that pedophilia is like a you're born with it and you can't control it.
I think for some people,
you know.
they're that way. I think there are stone cold predators and pedophiles who will operate no matter what. And these are the guys who were doing it before the internet. They were at the shopping mall food court or the bad little league coach preying upon the, you know, the single parent child.
I had one of those.
Yeah, I mean, they're out there. And the bad teacher, whatever. And then you've got the young guys who are opportunists who probably can be given probation and some treatment. And there are treatment protocols for the right person
Yeah.
that work. And then you've got this group in the middle, right? These guys who are predisposed to sex with a child, and they wouldn't act on it, but then they get going in these chat rooms and they blur the line between fantasy and reality, and they get hooked up in the anonymity of the internet. A lot of people say things online they wouldn't say face to face.
Right.
And then the addictive quality of it. The next thing you know, they're knocking on our door. They blur this line between fantasy and reality, and they can't control it.
There was a case a few years back in New York, the cannibal cop.
Mm-hmm.
he never acted on it, but he had like letters that he had written
Right.
that was like, we're gonna like skin you and eat you, but he never did.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of interesting. Where it was like, I mean, on just a logical level, I want this guy locked up.
Yeah.
But on
It
like a
doesn't
legal
seem-
level, it's
it doesn't
like
seem like the guy you want, running the traffic light.
Yeah,
at
yeah.
right, 3rd Street.
right.
Got the white gloves
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
yeah,
True.
But on a legal level, it's like, can you? Is that if you were to just chat? Obviously all of it's terrible, but it's like, where does it actually? When does it become a crime? What's
When does
the
it
actual,
cross the
yeah.
threshold? Well, in online crimes, it's the solicitation of a child. So in most cases, the crime in my cases is committed online,
Right.
whether they show up or not. In fact, they will in these sting operations, after they do the undercover part of it, they'll always have 3 or 4 or 5 guys who committed a crime but didn't show up, and they go out and get them later. So it's a fine line. I see what you're saying. Where does fantasy
Like
cross the line
if you were
into
to,
criminal
if you were
activity?
to just chat
Yeah.
and never take it further, and you're like, that's how I curb my urges, that's still illegal.
If you commit the solicitation of a minor for sex, if you think you're talking to a minor, and you're
talking about
suggesting,
sex?
if you're suggesting a meeting for sex,
Okay, so that's what I mean. So
Yeah.
if you're talking to a minor and you're just like telling a story about sex, would that be illegal?
you probably wouldn't cross the threshold.
Interesting.
I mean, you're right on the edge.
Right.
You know?
Is it weird to you how weird some of the laws are? And I'm going to reference again the a friend of the family show I'm watching, where Bob Birchtold is his name. He is trying to get he's basically blackmailing the parents to allow him to marry the girl, because then it's not a crime that they've been having sex. Is that kind of stuff? Is that still real, or was that changed?
I think in some states, the age is lower than it would normally be for consent if there's a marriage, if the parents sign off on it. And again, I'm not an expert on laws in every state. I mean, I just remember, the story of Jerry Lee Lewis, who recently passed away, who married his 13-year-old cousin.
Yeah.
And the reporter asks,
Crazy.
about this shocking revelation. He said, well, I done married her, didn't I? And so in that culture at the time, I'm not saying it's all right, but
Right.
there was a gray area.
There's a lot of examples of that, and you go back of like even just celebrities currently, and like 20, 30 years ago they married someone this age or were dating someone that age, and it's like not that long ago. The shit was right there.
Well, it was.
I guess in Hollywood it's the worst, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, illegal is illegal, and I think there's a difference between somebody who, is of age dating somebody who's older, and somebody who was groomed while they were underage into a relationship that was sexual.
Is there one thing that jumps out as the most like they all go through, or a piece of
similarity? I think it's the grooming. It's the, when I was growing up, police and parents would say, don't talk to strangers. Good advice then, good advice today. But the problem today with the internet is the guy who's a stranger on Wednesday may not be a stranger on Friday.
Right.
And so they're good at manipulating, and they're good at finding the vulnerable portion of that population. They'll look for somebody who's, from a challenged home life, or somebody who's, broken in some way, that they can take advantage of that, or unhappy at school, or just purely involved, having some feeling of adolescent angst. They prey on that, and that's what you see as a similarity with all these guys.
So Casey Anthony's coming out with, there's a documentary coming out with Casey Anthony in it, which I'm sure is going to make major waves. When something like that goes like national, like Casey Anthony or Brian Laundrie and the girl he killed and all that, like, do you...
Gabby Petito,
yeah. Do you, like, dive into those things, or you kind of like...
I do sometimes. The other two examples I mentioned on the breaking news, the Cabo thing and the Idaho thing, we're involved in those right now. The Petito thing, I mean, it's a shocking case, and my heart goes out to her parents. And
how did Casey
people.
Anthony really get off? Like, that was one that I think I was
an
too young, and I don't know
interesting
if the
case,
internet
yeah.
was really where it's at, where everyone knew the details, but it's like, it seems like it was so open and shut that there must be more that the general public doesn't know.
I remember reading that she said they asked the nanny did it. I think at the time she was playing a nanny, and they asked what the nanny's name was, and she said Zanny, and I was like guilty.
Yeah.
How do you not?
Zanny meaning
the nanny
Xanax.
did.
You know, meaning that's what she gave the kid Xanax. I interviewed her parents 4 or 5 years ago when I was doing Crime Watch Daily, a syndicated crime show, and I did not, after that interview, have any suspicion that they had any role in this.
Really? Because she's currently blaming her father.
Meaning that you think they did have something to do with it.
I don't think they had anything to do with it.
Okay.
I think that that they were, you know, as concerned as everybody else, and I think she was, you know, she had a hand in it in terms of what happened in court and the jury, and you know, you never really know, and I never interviewed any of the jurors involved in it, but I don't think, my impression from interviewing the parents, and it was a long, emotional 2 or 3 hour interview just within the last 3 or 4 years, was that they didn't have anything to do with it. I think they really, and you see a lot of this after the story, trying to sell a different angle of it. And already in the Casey Anthony thing, and I didn't cover it personally, but my sense from reading the news accounts was that the judge has called bullshit on it already, saying that this is, you know, this is not.
Well, it's wild. I believe that they said she doesn't have any editorial control over it. Right. And I'm like, how do you think this is going to go for you, Casey?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think this is going to go the way you want unless there is some sort of smoking gun compelling reason that sounds like there's not. But, you know, what's even the play there?
Well, I don't know. I don't know whether she got paid for it.
Yeah,
I don't have any insight into it. But
Right.
my sense is that she probably doesn't do anything unless it benefits her.
Yeah.
And my gut is that, you know, that could potentially involve compensation.
I think that's Scott Peterson.
Well, I think he's guilty as homemade sin.
Yeah.
Again, it's not.
What if you just like love the guy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we should.
But it is
We should
fan.
should
Big fan.
pull together back in the 90s.
I guess the bigger question there is, what do you think of
I think it's
where
a
true crime
sociopath and-
documentaries have kind of gone? Because you can watch certain things that it's like, well, wait a minute, this seems fucking crazy,
Right.
And then you realize, oh wait, they left this out or left that out. You know, I've seen the staircase was one where it was like
They left out that he did it to 2 other women.
Well, making a murder.
Yeah,
So
right.
we have the same studio, Transition Studios, that I work with on True Blue, have the flip side of Making a Murder, and it's compelling.
Really?
You're going to see that it's done now, and they're out.
I'd
They're
love
out.
to see that.
You'll see a sampling on True Blue in the not too distant future. But Sean Reck, who's the director and the filmmaker on the thing, who's my partner in True Blue, has been working years on this.
Interesting.
And
I never thought that Making a Murder was as much of a like a compelling
Well,
case.
it was
as
one of the
most
first
people did.
ones, but when he's got smoking gun documents
Yeah. I mean,
that take you inside what really happened when they made that film, the original one, and this new film is going to be
Cool.
a newsmaker.
I'm very excited to watch that.
That's what we almost need.
Almost the anti.
It's the opposite side of it.
100%.
Yeah, you need
And,
a new wave of documentaries that like jump on the ones that everybody believed or saw. That
Right.
it's like here's
because
this is
a
why
lot
you're
of
being
these
fed
things,
bullshit.
you know, when Netflix came of age, right, and I've danced with Netflix about different projects over the years and been to the mothership there in Hollywood and all the things, but a lot of these filmmakers were not really journalists.
Oh yeah,
And
not at
so,
all.
so they
they're
have a
just making
point.
story.
They have a
They're-
point of view,
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
fine if that's
Yeah.
your documentary. But you need to be painfully transparent about your
That is a huge disclaimer
about
on the
how you
front.
do it,
Like,
right?
you know,
but
we
even
have
in the
no-
Predator franchise today and 18 years ago, you know, we were not criticized, I guess, for working too closely with police or, you know, what we're doing or all kinds of different things. And mostly it was old school, you know, members of IRE who were saying these things. But, you know, we were always painfully transparent about our methodology. And this is what we do, and this is who works on it, and this is what happens. And, you know, nothing was left behind. And it isn't today. I mean,
Got it.
everything's right out in the open.
Right,
So you can not like it, but you don't have to watch it. But I'm telling you exactly the way this went down and how this guy got into
and
this
that's the key
situation.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think that you like that true crime? Like you sound like a true crime podcast. If that
Yeah,
makes
well,
sense.
I have one, so that's convenient.
But what I'm saying is,
chicken or the egg?
do you think they started because of you? Like it's almost
I
like
mean, it is.
like when you do. Why do you do 2-hour podcast? Well, that's what Rogan does, and that's he kind of
Right.
started it. Why do you talk like that? What's how Chris Hansen talks?
Right.
And it almost like it sounds exactly like it's supposed to. If that makes
Well,
sense.
it's
You're the Dateline voice. You're the
well,
that.
look, Dateline's got a lot of voices and good. Those guys are. I was 21 years there and great experience, and all that allowed me to do what I do today. But those guys do a great job, Keith and Josh and Dennis, and they're good pals. But yeah, I think there's probably some similarity in the cadence or the storytelling. I mean, when I went to NBC in 1993. That's how long ago I went. I was a local reporter in Detroit, and so I wasn't necessarily used to doing long form stories.
Right.
And it was a bit of a transition for me.
Yeah,
I mean, they were vested, and I was lucky to work with people who cared about me enough to see that there was potential and to kind of teach me how to do it. It's not down and dirty minute 30 like leading the 5 o'clock news in Detroit at Channel 4 or Channel 7.
So what do you do to relax, man? What's the off day for Chris Hansen?
I'm big into exercise. I go see a trainer. I enjoy playing tennis. I enjoy running. I enjoy reading, spending time with my wife and our extended family. And
you ever cut loose and just like rage? Like, is there a
Not
Chris
anymore.
Hansen like
Not anymore.
those days are gone.
Yeah.
I've had my fair share of that over the years, having fun. But no, I look. My kids are 31, 28. 23 and 21. So, I have 2 stepkids. We're blended, and everybody is great and doing well. My oldest is in television production. He lives in Brooklyn, and the next one's a television reporter in Orlando for the Fox station down there. And so, those 2 and I get together and we criticize each other's hard work. But it's fun. It's fun for me to, and I didn't push them into it, they sort of just gravitated towards it. But one is definitely a behind the scenes guy and is all into the Brooklyn scene and loves that, and the other is on camera.
How strict were
The
you?
other's a prima donna.
I was like me, like his old man.
The talent.
I was.
Were you like no phones, no internet? I'm watching what you're doing. No
I remember it was
Instagram,
funny.
no-
It was funny because when I at whatever age I set for the kids or their mom set for the kids to get a phone. My oldest son became that age and went to the store at the mall and got him a phone, and the younger one is 2 years younger, and the guy says to me, well, we're having a 2-for-1 sale. I said, well, all right, we'll get him one too. And my oldest son's like, hey, will you make me wait? And so, I think they're 13 and 11 or something.
I know that's gonna happen.
Their
with me
numbers
for
are still
sure.
sequential today, so I can remember them. I'm trying to track them down. But I think I was reasonable.
Because when you see the dark side of everything,
You
did
do, but
start
you
to
can't.
freak out
You
every
can't.
time?
You can't bring that home.
No, but it's like it'd be hard, It
is hard, but I mean, they grew up in a pretty protected environment, and as a father, and you guys know or will know at some point, perhaps that the whole trick to being a parent is to get your kids to do what's right or what you want them to do, and making them think it's their idea.
Yeah.
And so I took them along on things, and while I was away a lot for work, we did a lot of cool things together, whether it was skiing, which I love and I find very relaxing, and I imparted that onto them, and they enjoy it today, to boating or whatever other family things we did. So I felt that I was connected enough to them. Mm-hmm. Where, of course, you worry. I worry today.
Right.
I worry when Connor's covering a hurricane in Florida, but I can't make him
How
all
crazy
hyped up
is
about
it that
that.
they make them stay in the fucking hurricane?
Well, that's their job.
But no, it's not. You can talk. You don't have to be in the middle of the hurricane and talk about the hurricane.
You don't have
when
to
they
be
have
in
that poor bastard who's like in the wind, like we're down here in the hurricane. Yeah.
Sometimes it gets a little extreme, but I think they're pretty good. He was in before he was in Orlando. He was in Oklahoma City, and they had to take tornado classes because they were right in the thick of it. And he never saw anything too serious tornado-wise. And I always joke with him. I said, in all my years at the network, when I was, tasked with occasionally having to cover breaking news like that, the joke was, if you don't want the hurricane to come to your town, send Hansen. Because if I went to Mobile, it went to Pascagoula. If I went to Gulf Shores, it went to Miami. I mean, wherever it was, there was always, my crew and I were having a beer at some gin joint someplace, because we couldn't get to where the action was. The hurricane was 100 miles away. Never.
Not once.
Not once. 40 years.
Who do you what John Benet Ramsey case? What do you think of that?
I think we're going to learn more about that.
Really?
I'm affiliated with CrimeCon, and one of my senior producers on True Blue is at CrimeCon. CrimeCon is like, as you can imagine, Comic-Con for crime, and it's a big deal. So they had John Ramsey was actually there, and I met with some people who've studied this for a long time, and I think there were potential, I don't know if conspirators is the right word, but people who could have been involved in a crime like this who were living in plain sight in that community, who never rose to the proper suspicion early on in the case. And I have more questions than answers like everybody else. I covered it early on, was it 95, 96, I guess, when it was happening. And I'm just now getting around to get back into it. But John Ramsey was at CrimeCon this year and spoke.
Really? Is that like a Casey Anthony thing where he doesn't do anything that doesn't benefit him?
I don't think it benefits him at all. I think he wants to find out what happened, and I think there are people who are very familiar with that family, and it's a town, Boulder. If you've been there, you know that it's not a high crime town, so it's easy to commit something heinous if you wanted to. But I'm led to believe that there was a network of people who had sexual interest in children, and there might have been some sort of ring or activity, and this might ultimately tie back to that.
But so just like I hate to say like good old fashioned, but just like it was just regular like pedophilia ring. It wasn't like
that's one of the theories, And again, I can't.
Sometimes it's just like there is no reason why other than there's pedophiles in that town.
It just a collision of events and human beings came together at a diabolical time for a very horrible crime, and it just had all the perfect storm elements of raising a ton of questions. The crime scene was mucked up. The girl was involved in the entertainment fashion show world at a very young age. The questions about, are you over-sexualizing a child and making her a target? I mean, all
it's
those
a Nancy
things.
Grace dream.
Yes, it's a Nancy Grace dream, exactly. So, it was the perfect storm. And so there's so many things that were shouting out at us as reporters. I mean, did we miss something? Did the police miss something? Obviously, because it's gone unsolved for all these years.
The last case that I took interest in was the serial case that the podcast.
Yes.
Which I thought was cool because it was not only the case itself, but that also like the podcast medium basically exploded because of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like twofold of not only the true crime but also the entertainment side of it, where it's like a whole new industry was born out of that.
And the podcast part of my world has become very important because obviously people follow it for the retrospective take on the cases, but I also talk about what's happened to the fellow since then. And it's also an opportunity to talk about the new projects. And then I have people reaching out to me saying, hey, we have this problem in our community. We're a small department. How do we put this together? So then you get involved in that. And not only do you help that community, but you have the story of covering it.
Yeah.
And people are very loyal and they're very interactive, and the questions range from specifics on a case to was that you in Starbucks in Cleveland the other day, and what happened, and so it's very rewarding as a content creator to have that kind of a relationship with your fans and followers.
Did you expect but did you have any awareness when you first started that it was going to be as mainstream?
No.
I mean, like you're a television show like Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They have
we've done. I mean, look.
You're in pop culture all
over.
Right. I mean, and we're now in the third generation of kids. I mean, sometimes we walk into, my wife and I'll go to a high school graduation party of some friends, and we have a home here in New York City and also a home in suburban Detroit, so we're back and forth all the time. And these kids know all about it. I joke, when my two oldest were in high school, they went to school with a lot of kids whose dads did cool things, sports team owners and shipbuilders and professional athletes and executives and Wall Street tycoons. And so having a dad on TV wasn't that big of a deal until South Park did the Chris Hansen Predator parody. Suddenly, I was the coolest dad.
Really?
Something like that.
I mean,
happens.
even the turtlenecks become like iconic.
Yeah,
I know.
I mean, there's a lot about you that is stuck. When the South Park comes out, are you take it in stride? Are you laughing at it?
Well, here's what happened. So I was in San Francisco on a shoot. And so they don't tell you.
No,
Simpsons does you go in the studio, put the head cans on, and they say, okay, here's your line. Lisa, what are you doing? No, faster. Lisa, what are you doing? No, faster. No, more Chris Hansen. So you know what's coming. South Park, they just do it.
Right.
And so one of my agents texts me from New York and says, South Park is doing you tonight. It's pretty funny. And so I'm 3 hours off, so I can't watch for 3 hours. I said, great, I'll check it out when it comes time here. And about 20 minutes later, it's taken a dark turn.
Yeah, that's
you've
what South
seen the
Park
episode.
does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
it's also,
it's fine.
it's-
I don't. Look, it means
it's-
people are paying
it's
attention.
hilarious.
And I got skin of rhino hide. Nothing bothers me. It'd be a hard business to be in if you're that sensitive. But they're allowed to make fun of me. I think it's fine if they make fun of me because at the end of the day, it still raises awareness.
Yeah.
On all these different projects that we have, and a very important topic that, will make parents and kids think for a second before they get themselves potentially in a position where they can be targeted.
Amen, brother. That's hopefully the name of the game, right?
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate
Yeah.
it. It's
Well, thanks for having me.
wildly
Thank
interesting.
you so
man.
much,
Yeah.
Chris.
So I thought I grabbed a couple of these, and I'm gonna
I knew
send
you
some
had
more
some.
over.
Oh
but
wow!
we got a little-
Wow!
So I'll
Look
get
at this.
everybody one of these.
That
I'm
is
just gonna list.
awesome.
Predator
That is-
uncut.
I'll get you more. I was in I came out of a screening on the way over here, so
sick, dude.
I got more.
XL. This is mine.
So, okay. Are you a large or?
Yeah, I'll take it. Well,
Turns out
these
being
days,
fat pays its bills.
these days I'm pushing XL as well. So,
Yeah, I'm right on the-
so
yeah,
obviously
but I'll get 'em
True
for you.
Blue is the new
True Blue rolls out, and like I said, we have a lot of good Predator segments coming out, and they're in editing, and some are done, and within that we'll have True Crime Nation, which is a news magazine where we'll do a lot of different things, and then we're doing these high-level documentaries too. The Tracy Utsana one with Jumana Kid, who was victimized, and so many others in that, and the real great thing about True Blue is that it allows us to be nimble and react and jump in these stories. The last two big documentaries I did for Discovery Plus, and I love the Discovery people, I truly do, but the Peter Nygaard Unseemly Investigation and the Onision in Real Life, the guy on YouTube who was preying upon girls, were 12 months and 18 months to
Long
do.
projects, yeah.
And there's an A meeting and a B meeting and a green light meeting, and they pair you with a project. It takes forever. We have a documentary coming out. It's like the Tinder swindler. We have the Facebook fiend, right? This is a guy who's preying upon women, young women, not just financially but sexually and
Tinder
physically.
swindler was a wild one. If
It's a
there's
great one.
another
So this
one,
is
I mean, the
similar in
financial
the-
stuff is crazy.
Yeah, the financial stuff is crazy. This is not as big level financial stuff, but it's just as bad in terms of the physical harm that this guy did. But these women got together and they reached out to me on social media. And we started digging into it, and we said, there's a hell of a story here. So now, because they were able to do that and we were able to react so quickly,
Yeah.
there's a warrant for this guy's arrest.
Wow,
And they're
well
going
done,
to
well
jam
done.
him in the next couple of weeks. So this is how law enforcement did what they were supposed to do, and I'm going to try to take credit for that, but it was not unhelpful that we were looking into this. But we're giving a voice to people and telling stories that, turning around in a matter of weeks as opposed to, months or a year. I mean, it's mind-numbing how long it takes to do a
Right,
documentary
right.
today.
Yeah,
and
we've
so we've
noticed that kind of
eliminated
stuff.
the bureaucracy of it. So
Well, we got a guy here who he started a podcast called The Case,
Right.
And it was missing persons in
Right.
Boston, and I think it ended up resulting in like a warrant down in North
Right.
Carolina for a similar type
Sure.
thing. But if you get past all the
You gotta
red
do
tape
it,
and you do
right.
it, like you can make. You can,
Oh, yeah,
make a
and
difference.
this
Get
stuff-
a-
and- but I don't-
although, let me ask you this:
Yeah.
there was another documentary I liked, "Don't Fuck with Cats" on Netflix.
Yeah.
That kind of paints the picture of like this vigilante stuff.
Right.
But is that like, was that also like the police were doing their work and you guys were just kind of like fans, or like I guess my question is, are people at home actually as like impactful in some of these investigations as some of these documentaries make it seem?
I think so, and I'll take you back to the the case of Tracy Hutsana, the con woman, masterclass con, been a con woman since the age of 15, according to her own family. Jumana Kidd, the former wife of Jason Kidd, who's a television celebrity on her own, really turned her home in Los Angeles into a war room, and with her kids pieced together the financial crime and how Tracy Hutsana stole $3 million or thereabouts from the kids' accounts, from her accounts, open credit lines that she had no idea about.
Wow.
And so that became very helpful.
Right.
Now, the FBI and the NYPD did a great job on this case, and it resulted in a guilty plea on the part of Tracy Hutsana, who was supposed to be sentenced in November, but claimed to have long-haul COVID. She didn't look like she had long-haul COVID when I approached her with a camera crew outside her restaurant in Phoenix, Arizona a couple weeks ago, and driving around and vacationing and doing all kinds of stuff and partying at bachelorette parties in Las Vegas.
Funny how that works, huh?
It's going to come back and bite her in the ass when the sentencing does come. But
it's gotta be great.
it takes some.
Gotcha, bitch.
It takes some. It takes some advocacy work, and it does. I've seen cases that I've investigated where, because the victims are in a vulnerable class, there's a mistrust between law enforcement, and there's a doubt sometimes on the part of law enforcement, and the victim has to come forward and has to do it. So the fact that we can, facilitate that and streamline it creates justice. And so I don't have to go through hoops and hurdles to get a crew. I call Sean Reck in Cleveland. I said, or Ryan at the office,
cool.
I need Conrad on Tuesday in wherever. Put him on a damn plane.
Right.
And I have it.
And it's your call on
it's
what
my call.
leads you want to follow or what tips you believe in.
We have an editorial process,
sure.
and I can't just wake up in the morning and take off on my own. But
but
I have I was doing an interview yesterday with an anchor in North Carolina. We got talking about this case in Cabo where the woman went on vacation and was killed, and they're trying to sort all that out. And I was explaining what True Blue was and what we're doing, and she said, "Boy, that sounds like a reporter's dream." I said, "Yeah, it took me 40 years to get here, but it is a reporter's dream."
I'm going to quit this shit and go work for True Blue.
We'll hire you. I think you guys got a pretty good gig here. So
not so bad.
But it's the same thing you guys are doing. It's like, you take it over and you do what you know how to do.
Well, that is actually Barstool does.
That's what Barstool does.
We kind of cut through a lot of the red tape and bureaucracy, and we just make the
Dan
content.
Abrams is doing the same thing with Law and Crime.
Yeah.
He's figured it out. It's more trial-oriented a little bit. Than
but he's not Chris Hansen. Come
on.
No,
I know, but there's only one. He's
a
good guy. We collaborate with him. They've got a nice setup over there too, and they do a great job. So
that's how you know you're above someone. He's a good guy.
No.
They all want to be you, Chris. You're not going to say it. I'll say it.
He's a good guy. He works hard.
They want to be Chris Hansen.
He's among the hardest working guys in TV. I think I am the hardest working guy in TV. He's right up, right next to me.
You definitely seem like it, and it's done a lot of good.
Well, we're not done yet. We got a lot of miles left.
So True Blue is a streaming service.
True Blue, TRUBLU. You can start to get information on it next week at watchtrueblue.com, and within True Blue will be the new Predator investigations, which we call Takedown. All the new crime documentaries we're working on, and we're going to do this news magazine, True Crime Nation, which I'm hosting and doing on the show too. So
awesome.
So it's a gradual rollout, but we've got a lot of great content being put together, and
it's like a true crime fan's dream.
Yeah, I think so. And we have. It's not just my stuff. We have like a lot of documentaries, a lot of different things.
That's where the Making a Murderer one's going to be?
The opposite. They're working on that now, but some portion of it or some version of it will ultimately be on True Blue. Yeah.
Very cool.
And I've seen clips, and it's
your eyes light up when you talk about
it. It is. These guys work. I'd like to take credit for it, but I can't. But they really have done a hell of a job here, and it's really something. So
awesome,
fantastic.
All right,
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good to see you. I'll get you the rest of those t-shirts.
Thank you so much.
Make sure you subscribe to KFC Radio on YouTube to get all the video content. Subscribe, comment, like, and make sure you turn on the bell notifications so you know whenever new video content drops.
I want to say something, but the video has to be faster. That's it.